Good morning. Um, Before we start reading today, I want to answer some questions about yesterday's reading because a lot of people had similar questions about that character Wu Kang. So, one of the popular questions was, why did he leave his family behind? So, the story of Wu Kang is actually a story that you can find in lots of different cultures. It's not necessarily exactly the same, but the idea is the same. And the story basically is that there's a person who has a lot and doesn't recognize it and wants more. And so they change their life to find more. And as they find more, they start losing the things in their own life because they are putting other things as more important than their family. So the basic story to be learned from Wu Kang's story is that you should be grateful for what you have. Because if you are always looking for something else that's going to be better or make you happier, you will always be doing that. There's always something more that you'll want. So the story and the idea behind him is just appreciate what you have. General gratitude. And he's chopping that tree at the end as sort of a punishment from the old man of the moon because he said the only thing left to teach you is patience and gratitude. So you're going to be stuck to this tree. And a lot of people said, well, why couldn't he cut the tree? Well, the red thread, I believe, is magic and probably just unbreakable. So anyway, that's the story of Wu Kang, who's going to be there cutting down that tree forever. And he's lost everything because he couldn't find happiness in his life to begin with. All right, chapter 43. I'm so excited to read. All right, Minli took one step into the walled courtyard and then stopped. Countless red threads covered the ground like intricate lace. Interwoven in the red strings were thousands and thousands of small clay figures, each no larger than her finger. Like a spider, in the exact center sat the old man of the moon. He sat cross-legged with a giant book on his lap. And what are we working on again with our comprehension? That's right, visualizing. So make these active pictures in your mind as you are hearing these details, and you will remember the story much better. And that is the purpose of reading, is to remember and learn something from it. All right, his head was bowed over two clay figures in his hand, so that the most Minli saw of him was the top of his head. But she could see his delicate, wrinkled hands skillfully tying the figures in his lap together with a red thread. Who do you predict those two figures are? He's tying with a red thread of destiny. That means they're meant to meet. A blue silk bag full of red strings lay open beside him, and Minli felt a shock run through her as she saw it. Ding, ding, ding. You might be thinking the same thing. I'm going to keep reading. She had seen that bag before. Deep blue silk, silver embroidery. It was the bag the Buffalo Boy's friend had been carrying that starry night. She's the goddess of weaving, Minli realized. She spins the red thread for the old man of the moon. I knew there was something different about her. No wonder she knew how to find the king. The old man reached beside him for his walking stick, a bent, twisted wood stick, and tapped it on the ground. Silently, the clay figures floated from his hand, drifted in the air, then settled to the ground at opposite ends of the courtyard. The old man's thread still connected them, and the red line wove itself among the other strands surrounding him. As Minli stared, the old man looked at her. The silver hair of his beard seemed to flow like a glowing waterfall and disappear into the folds of his robes, and his dark eyes matched the blackness of the night sky. Ah, the old man said, it is you. Minli nodded and bowed deeply. She would have kneeled on the ground, but she was afraid of disrupting the clay figures standing on the ground at her feet. Well, Come here, then, the old man said impatiently, and he tapped his stick on the ground again. And with a sound like a flapping of birds' wings, the clay figures moved, clearing a path for Minley. I know you have questions for me, the old man said. Every 99 years, someone comes here with their questions. But I will only answer one. So choose your question carefully. One question? Minley almost stopped walking in shock. If she was only allowed to ask one question, she could not ask Dragon's question for him, unless she did not ask her own. Minley felt like a fish gasping for air. What was she going to do? The memories of the hard work in the rice fields, her father's careworn hands, the plain rice in the dinner bowls, and Ma's sighs washed upon her like splashes of water from the lake. She had to change her fortune. She must ask how to do it. And if you think about it, Minley is acting a little bit like someone else that we just read about. Having this home with Ma and Ba and the rice and a place to sleep, and deciding that that was not enough, that she needed to come and change her fortune. So who is that a little bit like? Wu Kang. And think about what happened to him in the end. So anyway, let's keep reading. But when Minley thought about Dragon waiting for her patiently, it was as if she had been struck. And like seeds falling from Wu Kang's tree, images of the dragon rained upon her. Their laughter as they passed the monkeys, his awkward struggles walking in the woods, his echoing roar as he flung the green tiger into the air, the kind hand he put on her shoulder when she cried, and the hopeful look in his eyes as she left. Dragon is my friend, Minley said to herself. What should I do? Minley's thoughts bubbled faster and faster like boiling rice. Every step she took seemed to throb, and Minley wasn't sure if the pounding was her heart or Wu Kang's axe in the distance. As she passed the clay statues, she thought she could see figures of the goldfish man, the buffalo boy, the king, and Da'afu silently watching her. Minley's feet seemed to ignore her pleas for slowness. Like the kite being pulled in, she was being drawn toward the old man of the moon without delay. Before she could decide whose question to ask, Minley found herself facing him. The old man of the moon looked at her expectantly. Yes? His black eyes as unreadable as the night sky. Minley looked down into the open book on his lap. She recognized the open page as the king's borrowed line. The smothered folds and the holes she had made in it when she had turned it into a kite were still there. Yet now the paper was invisibly fastened in the book, with only a thin line like a scar showing it had ever been removed. And the words had changed again. There was a single line of words running down the entire page. And you probably remember that this paper, this borrowed line, this is the page that it was originally blowing away in the wind from the Happy Family hundreds of years ago when they wrote down on this piece of paper a single word that was the secret to happiness, that was written again and again and again and again and again. And it fluttered away in the wind, and someone found it, and the dragon and the king magistrate thought that they were playing a trick on him because he couldn't read it. And we've talked so much about what is this single word to make us happy. I know we've talked about love and patience and family. And what is the theme that's been going on with Minley this whole time as she has met different characters, as she met the buffalo boy. And what did he teach her when she tried to give him something? And he was like, I don't need anything. I'm fine the way I am. And what she could learn from Da'afu's family. And what she could learn from Wu Kang, who definitely did not have this. What now do you think is the single word that's the secret to happiness? Make a decision, because I'm about to read it finally. What is it? This one thing that we could keep in our heart that would help us to be happy every day, no matter what. All right, I'm about to read it. Let's see. All right. There was a single line of words running down the entire page. As she looked, Minli realized for the first time she could read the words, or really the word. For the line was only made of one word, written over and over again. And that word was thankfulness. And suddenly, like the light when the clouds move away from the moon, Minli knew clearly what question to ask. There is a dragon waiting at the bridge, she said. Why can't he fly? And I really should be stopping here, but I will read a little bit more of the next chapter. All right, chapter 44. Ma and Ba continued to wait for Minli, quietly and sadly. Even though they told themselves that they trusted Minli and believed she would return, Ma spent most of her time looking out the window, lost in thought, while Ba grew older and grayer every day. The only time they found comfort was in the evenings, when Ba would tell a story to make the time pass faster. In the escape of Ba's tales, they could forget that Minli was not with them and imagine that she was there listening. One evening, when the moon filled the sky, Ma spoke. Husband, she said, tonight I would like to tell a story. Ba was surprised, but nodded. This is the story that Ma told. Once there was a woman who had a kind husband and a beautiful daughter. A great mountain shadowed their home, making the land that they lived on poor and their house small. But there was always enough to eat, and the water always flowed in hot months, while a fire always burned during the cold ones. Yet the woman was not content. What do you think content means? They have all these wonderful things, but she was not content. So content doesn't really mean happy. It just sort of means that with however things are, you're fine with it. Sort of happy. The woman begrudged the barren mountain and the meager land and swallowed her plain rice with bitterness. She frowned at the humble cotton of their clothes and sighed in resentment at the tight rooms of the house. Day after day, the woman grumbled. When she heard stories of treasures of gold and jade, she was filled with envy. Why do we have nothing? She sulked in frustration. We have no treasures, no fortune. Why are we so poor? Her husband and daughter worked harder every day, hoping to bring wealth to their house. But the unfeeling land did not cooperate, and the house remained cramped. The clothes stayed modest, and there was only just enough rice for the three of them. The woman also remained unhappy. Her displeasure grew like weeds, uncontrollable, entangling. The woman was so caught up in her dissatisfaction, she did not realize that she was planting seeds of discontent in her daughter as well. Until then, her daughter had been pleased with their life, but now she began to feel troubled. The rice that filled their bowls began to taste bland. The clothes that she had liked for their colors now felt rough, and the house she had run freely around in had become stifling. Finally, unable to bear the growing frustration, the daughter stole away in the middle of the night. Vowing not to return, until she could bring a fortune back to her family. And of course, whose story is Ma telling? That's right, she's telling her own story. And she's saying that Ma was so unhappy with what she had that she taught Minli to be the same way. And it was only then that the woman saw the stupidity of her behavior. For without her daughter, the house became too large and empty, and she was not hungry for the extra rice. As the days passed in loneliness, fear, and worry, the woman cursed herself for her selfishness and foolishness. How lucky she had been! She was at last able to see that her daughter's laughter and love could not be improved by having the finest clothes or jewels. That joy, this is my favorite line of the whole book. Ready? That joy had been in her home like a gift waiting to be opened. Let me reread that. So she's saying, let's back up. She was at last able to see that her daughter's laughter and love could not be improved by having the finest clothes or jewels. So all this time, the joy she had been looking for had already been there. And she's comparing it to it like that joy was like a gift in her home waiting to be unwrapped. Like that what's in that package is just the idea of being thankful for what you have. And all along it had been there if she had only learned that and known that. The woman wept tears for which there was no comfort. For all this time, she had been longing for treasures, and she had already the most precious one of all. Now wiser, the woman could do nothing but go to her husband, beg forgiveness for her actions, and hope to someday do the same with her daughter. She did not know if she would receive compassion from either, but she vowed she would wait for it. If necessary, she would wait, like the mountain that shadowed them. And we're going to stop right there. See you later.